Hello everyone, welcome back to the True North Report, news everyone needs to know. And it's a new year, a new decade. I hope you all had a great new year. I hope you got up to a lot of good fun. And we'll see what the 2020s happen to bring for us. 2010s, in my opinion, was not a great decade. Wasn't a good decade for humanity. But that's in the past now, and we'll end up seeing what the future brings. I think I started off the new year right. I made a decision on the December 31st. I made a decision, and I think it was for the best. I decided that for this new year, I was going to make the True North Report official. So I ended up paying for the domain for the True North Report. It is no longer the True North Report at wixwebsite.com. It is now officially the truenorthreport.org. And I've been working on it still a little bit more, trying to update it, add in a few more things. I've been adding in some more articles recently. Again, videos, as I showed last time, are all the same. A couple more documentaries on there for you. And we also got some more documents. So one thing that is new is I added in a crime section in which I will start monitoring and posting links to articles about crime, some data. So for instance, we go into the GTA. I've pulled up some of the data that is available. Now, unfortunately, this sort of data is not completely available for every city. The Toronto Police Service does a better job when it comes to keeping track of homicides, of shootings that happen throughout the year. So there's a lot of data available on there for you. Add in a search bar so you can look through the website. So I'm pretty happy so far with the website, and I want to ask you all once again, please go and check out the truenorthreport.org and, bookmark it, share the articles. I've connected once again to many different sites that I feel are probably the better sites out there. Some of them I trust, some of them are just better than the other mainstream, like I've said about the post-millennial in the past, and hyperlinks to the relevant articles of the day and of yesterday. And one thing I'm thinking about is archiving these hyperlinks, so that way everybody always has a place they can go to check it out. So once again, that is the truenorthreport.org. Check it out, bookmark it, share the material. I'd greatly appreciate it. So again, I hope you all had a great New Year's. I hope you went out, had a good time with friends and family, maybe got a little bit of your drink on. That's okay. Just don't drink and drive, of course. But unfortunately, it was not a great New Year's for everybody. One thing that, once the New Year rolled around the 2020s, one thing I started to take notice of is on social media, where people from Europe were starting to post about the type of New Year's that was around in their area. And this involved a lot of crime and a lot of violence. This is an article I wrote, John, very recently. It was probably only put up an hour or two ago, in which European migrants cause a wave of New Year's Eve violence. So this event was thoroughly documented by the Twitter account International Security and Conflict Research. This is the account right here. Go give them a follow. It's at ISCR_com. So you can find them there. And in this, we have a series of videos that come out from Brussels, that come out from Berlin, that come out from Paris, and a few other cities around in Europe, and the type of violence that they were subjected to.
Mais c'est à toi! Ils ont mis un scooter dedans.
Now, this was in Brussels, Belgium. And in there, we had a bunch of vandalism 30 vehicles were set ablaze, 75 trash cans were set ablaze, they were using Molotov cocktails, there were 211 arrests, and there were firearms discharges, as well as using using fireworks as projectile weapons. And in here, we can see the firearms that are being used. So that was in Brussels. Then we also have Germany. Berlin seemed to have gotten it the worst. There were 617 fires to businesses and vehicles, 806 emergency service calls, 24 attacks on first responders. There was a series of sexual assaults, firearm discharges, and fireworks that were being used. Now, some have been speculating whether in some of these videos that we're viewing, whether the whether the guns that were being used were starter pistols, since this seemed to be something that was used in the past, that during celebrations, starter pistols with blanks were being used. Now, it's kind of difficult to tell whether that's the case. Right now, I'm going to go on the opinion that these are, in fact, real firearms that are being used with real ammunition. I don't have a reason to suspect otherwise. But these situations, these are not coming out of Middle Eastern countries as it might appear on these videos. These are in European countries.
Straße.
This is just pure chaos on the streets. And again, it was not regulated to one city or two cities, but when it came to Germany, there seemed to be a few different cities that this was happening. Same with France. So here we have Paris. And we can see that there are a number of cars that are burning in the distance. There were thousands of police officers. The report that I saw said 100,000 police officers that were stationed on the streets in Paris alone. Now, maybe that was an exaggeration, perhaps, but there were still, regardless, thousands of police officers that were present. And then we have Strasbourg here, where 220 vehicles were burned, a number of police officers were assaulted and injured, 40 people ended up getting arrested, and this is the aftermath. Now, this is not widely being reported on by the mainstream press. Now, from what most of my information, all these videos came from social media. Most of my information I had to get from people that were on the ground videotaping this and reporting on it. There was very few that was being reported on. One article I found that talked about, I believe it was Berlin. They were talking about Berlin and this other city that was there, which was Wolfsburg, which is this one here. One was an InfoWars European affiliated site that I got the information from, and they did link to an article that was coming out of Germany. I did find one article that was covering what was going on in Strasbourg in France. But all in all, considering how much violence ended up happening, it was not a widely reported on. It kind of reminded me back in 2015 and 2016, the attacks that took place in Cologne, Germany, and all across different areas in Germany, in which around 2,000, mostly, if not completely, migrant men ended up going out in groups and and robbing, harassing, sexually assaulting, and even raping 1,200 women in Germany. And it was covered up by the police, by the press. It took almost a week after the events for it to get out, and that was just because the victims of those assaults were making a fuss about it, rightfully so. But it seems to me like they're doing the same type of thing. Now, it's not exclusively migrant men that are doing it, but it seems to be mostly done by immigrants that have arrived in the country. They're doing this to the people, to the cities, to the cultures that open their doors and allow them to come in. And this is sort of the repayment that has ended up happening. And this is the same sort of thing that we can expect over here in North America. It does happen to a small degree. But the problem is that Europe, almost universally, except for a few small countries here, opened up the floodgates during the 2015 migrant crisis, where they just allowed millions of people to walk into their country, and this is the result. Especially for something such as France, this is nothing new. If you've been paying attention over there, you've seen the migrants that have been fighting with police in these cities such as Paris. It's not just the yellow vests that are fighting with the police, but this sort of situation has become a normal thing to happen in Paris. Now, of course, there's going to be plenty of people that are unaffected by this, that'll say, oh, it's no big deal, this is being blown out of proportion. But the point is that this is happening. You have riot police on the ground, maybe not daily, but on a pretty regular basis, that are firing tear gas into crowds. They have actually come out with the yellow vest with a heavy hand, and they've treated the immigrants much lighter in comparison to the yellow vests. Now, the yellow vests are coming out, despite the fact what they try and say, it's just they're protesting the gas tax. Kind of hard to believe, considering that protest has gone on for over a year now, and still maybe doesn't have the numbers it did last year, but still has a pretty large amount of people that are showing up to protest every single week. But there was more than that. It had to do with representation by the French government, and that they were not receiving. But this is becoming a reality, and it's due to mass migration. And this is what the type of future they want for us here in Canada. For those who are unaware of it, there is a non-profit organization out there called the Century Initiative. Now, the Century Initiative are advocating for more mass migration to Canada. They're advocating that they want to see the Canadian population be 100 million people by the year 2100. So in less than 100 years, they want to more than triple the current population, and this is all going to happen through immigration. Just recently, we found out that last year, 2019, between July and September, in those months, there was one of the largest population spikes in the country we haven't seen since 1971, and almost completely due to immigration, where 200,000 immigrants were brought into our country in that 3 months. Now, if that was a steady number, then we're looking at 800,000 migrants just in 2019 alone. That is a huge increase from what we're being told. That doesn't include illegal border crossers. That doesn't include the foreign students that are here. That doesn't include foreign workers that have arrived here, but just people who have shown up in the country. We can guarantee 200,000 between July and September, that 3-month period. And if it was anything similar throughout the rest of the year, 800,000. This is the future that they want. This is all because of replacement migration, which the UN has admitted to. They have full out said they need mass migration for replacement migration. Now they try and pass this off as it is replacement numbers because, we got a dwindling population. But it's funny how at the same time when they tell us, when the press when the governments, when the UN, when the EU tells us that we need to stop having so many kids. You can't have so many kids because of climate change. And then they say, we need to bring more people in. Our population is dwindling. This is exactly what they're trying to do. Because these people may cause a lot of violence, but it doesn't affect those in charge. They're away from all that. It'll keep the remainder of the population divided, but these people are not really protesting the government. No, as long as they could keep those freebies coming from the government, we're not going to see any of that. They're not going to see any of that. So they are literally trying to replace us with a more, not necessarily more docile, but a less resistant people. This is the whole point of it. And there was something that just came to my attention earlier today that I want to talk about because it also has to do with immigration. Where is it? Here it is. Alright, so this is a video on YouTube from Diego Sol Reina Español, who has almost 1 million subscribers on YouTube. This video has more than 1 million views on YouTube. Now, it's all in Spanish, and pretty much all of the people responding to this responded in Spanish. This is because this is an instructional video for new immigrants. So it's not based for Canadians, and it's funny how this is becoming more common. You have all these people. You have Sikhs, you have Muslims, Arabs, Chinese that are now starting to put out videos on YouTube almost like it's being financed by the government that are encouraging people to immigrate to Canada just in time for the rural immigration plan implemented by the government. But here's this video. Now, it is in Spanish, so it'll be difficult to understand for most, I assume. But we're just going to go through a couple things, a couple scenes in here, and what's important.
Prometes a vivir permanentemente en una comunidad rural. Aprobación del gobierno. Todo comienza en, a ver, repitan conmigo.
So this seems to be our friend here. This is, I suppose, Diego Sol Reina. Since that's the name of the channel. So this is the man here. As I understand it, this is his wife. This is his child. And what he is doing is encouraging people to immigrate to Canada. The Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot Program. So he is letting people around the world know about this. Now, this is becoming very common. But there's something in particular I want to show you that he does in here.
Aplicar. También es raro una pesca y bosque. Y aquí nos viene una lista de granjas.
Giving instructions about where to go, the type of jobs that are available. Again, most of them are in rural areas. But here we go. Where is it? Are you noticing anything? Funny, bunch of white women are present right now, aren't they? Do you know why that is? Do you know why there's a bunch of white women on screen? Well, I'll answer that for you. It's because our friend here, Diego, is making a video not just about coming to Canada, not just about moving here and moving into these rural areas. No. He is also making a video about where to meet white women when you come to Canada. Yeah. And for what reason do you think that is? Because the whole point, what he is pushing, what they are trying to push on us these days, is that you need to race mix. Now, I am not, in and of itself, against race mixing. What I am against is this being state-funded and practically state-mandated when it is being forced down your throat. And I especially don't like it when it's not a universal thing that they're trying to do. They're trying to push it on one specific group of people, and that would be white people. But anywhere else, and it's perfectly acceptable. And for those who don't believe me, I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you something. You go to Google Images. You type in black couple. Bunch of black couples. Oop. Type in Asian couples. Bunch of Asian couples. Arab couples. Arab couples. Bunch of Arab couples. White couples. And what do we see when it comes to white couples? And here's even an image of it. Why do black people keep popping up when you put in white couples? Well, that's a damn good question. It's almost like it's one group of people that is being targeted. It's like it's only white people that are being targeted when it comes to this race mixing agenda. Now the thing is white people are actually a global minority. And the population is declining. Every other single race has an increasing population. Yet it's only one group of people. It's one type of countries that are not allowed to have an area to themselves. And you can notice that since people started making a fuss about this, because this is not new, people have been posting about this. I think I saw this at least last year when people were starting to talk about this. So it's nothing new that they're trying to do. And Google ended up changing that. Started showing more images, didn't they? But even in what they showed us, you're still seeing. You're seeing some, but you're seeing still black women with white men. Black men with white women. And it's just... But it wasn't the same the other way around. It's a social engineering. And this guy right here, Diego Sol Reina Espanol, is encouraging this. And again, do you think it's a coincidence that all at the same time this has been popping up? That it all has to do with all these groups of people, all these immigrants that are now coming out telling everyone, hey, come to Canada, putting out all these videos on social media. And why is the government implementing a rule program? Now, they've recently come out and said, oh, you can pick your immigrants. But still, we're going to force you to take immigrants. The reason for it is quite clear. Because in 2015, and the same thing ended up happening in 2019, but in 2015, areas with the most immigrants voted disproportionately for the Liberal Party. So, there's a few different things that are happening right now. It has to do with forced diversity, forced inclusion, which nobody likes. Nobody likes having to be forced to take people in. 1 second. Nobody likes being forced to take people in. I mean, you look at what ended up happening with the Boy Scouts down in the US over the last year. They were trashed because they would not take in girls. It's literally called the Boy Scouts. So a number of chapters of the Boy Scouts ended up shutting down. And those Boy Scouts that didn't, ended up taking on girls. And the first troop of women came out. It was an all-girls Boy Scouts troop. So this is starting to target disproportionately white people, disproportionately men, and disproportionately straight men. You ever feel like the game's rigged against you? Alright. Now let's check in on another friend of ours. Another friend of ours, Kevin Spacey. If you remember when we were talking about him last time, Kevin Spacey had put out his video, Kill Him With Kindness. And then the next day, another one of his accusers was dead. The third accuser of Kevin Spacey dead, along with the fact that one of his victims decided to plead the fifth and not answer any questions, not cooperate with the prosecution. And now, Kevin Spacey's sexual assault lawsuit settles sexual assault lawsuit after accuser's death. The actor and the accuser's son have filed court papers to end the case. According to papers filed Monday in federal, the mysterious sexual assault lawsuit brought by an anonymous massage therapist against Kevin Spacey is ending, according to papers filed Monday in federal court. The plaintiff, suing as John Doe, alleged being forced to grab the actor's genitals twice during a massage at a private residence in Malibu. A judge allowed the case to move forward despite Spacey's objection that the plaintiff's identity was being shielded. Then tragedy struck. John Doe died, and after the accuser's attorney informed Spacey, the actor's attorney filed a notice of death in court. This began a 90-day clock for the accuser's estate to be substituted into the case. In November, the accuser's son successfully petitioned a probate court to become special administrator. The probate filing cited the urgency of Spacey's suit. Now comes the settlement. Attorney for Spacey and the special administrator filed a stipulation to dismiss the case with prejudice, meaning claims can't be refiled. No terms of the deal were made public. So no wonder Kevin Spacey said in his video, Killing Him With Kindness. No wonder he said, it's been a good year. Because in that year, three of Spacey's accusers had died. One of his accusers, or one of the people that were going to be a witness in court, plead the fifth and stop cooperating, and now his sexual assault lawsuit has been settled with no details being released. So once again, for those who are skeptical, tell me, what are the fucking chances? What are the chances that all this just happened to go in the right direction for Kevin Spacey? I'll tell you, you got a better chance of being fucking struck by lightning 5 times. So now, nothing's going to be heard of this. And as we stated last time, we know that he's connected back to Democrats. We know he's connected back to the Clintons. We know he's connected back to Jeffrey Epstein. Rode the Lolita Express. So it's not a fucking coincidence. Don't ever believe that it is. Alright. So here's a report out of Breitbart, and I don't really like Breitbart. I try not to use them. But here's a report that is important, and is also going to play a factor into what's going on in Canada. Germany to force internet providers to hand over data, passwords of people accused of hate speech. Angela Merkel's government is preparing a new bill that will force internet service providers to hand over data, including passwords of those accused of engaging in hate speech online. Minister of Justice Christine Lambrecht, a member of the Social Democrats, is preparing the bill, which will force service providers, email hosts, online retailers, and others to give the government the usernames, passwords, IP addresses, and more of suspects, MDR reports. Lambrecht was slammed by many over the proposal, with Hamburg's data protection officer Johann Kasper calling it an attack on privacy. So just like what's happening in the UK, they're now going to come to your home if you say something mean online. Because in the UK, despite the fact that they have rape gangs that are roaming their streets and terrorist attacks that are happening, they feel they need to cover up the rape gangs to protect the immigrants. and then come after you for talking about it. I mean, fuck, that's what happened with Tommy Robinson. Regardless of whether he's a Zionist shill or not, that is exactly what ended up happening with this man. And this is now coming to Germany, and you better believe that Canada is next. Because we're already having our own laws that are starting to be drafted when it comes to hate speech. Justin Trudeau pushing for significant penalties for online hate speech in Canada. Mr. Blackface himself, Canada's version anyway, has come out in condemnation of online free speech, declaring it's time to start imposing significant penalties on social media companies that refuse to remove all hate speech within 24 hours. We're talking about Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, of course, who has yet to find a social justice cause so outlandish as to be unworthy of his public endorsement. And when it comes to making the entire internet a virtual safe space for liberals, or else be shut down or taken over by the government, Trudeau is fully on board. It's mass censorship. Trudeau reportedly told his country's Minister of Heritage to write a mandate letter ordering Canadian legislators to draw up a bill, or series of bills, outlining his plan to crack down on internet free speech. In it, hate speech is specifically named as needing special attention. But then there comes the age-old question. What is hate speech? Because the term varies depending on who you talk to. The term varies depending on which country you're in. So nobody can actually really set down a mandate for what is hate speech and what isn't. And this is going to be the problem. You're going to say something that could be factually true, but it's going to be considered hate speech. And you're going to get in trouble over it. Now, right now, allegedly, they're just saying the social media companies have to take it down. But you can guarantee that there is going to be repercussions. That's going to be fines. That is going to be jail time. Simply for saying the wrong thing online. And I have no doubt that this law is not going to be repealed if a conservative government ended up coming into power. Not a chance in hell. In fact, I'm just writing now I don't know how many parts it's going to be, but I got an article up that I put out yesterday called "What Do You Expect from a Right-Wing Party?" And in it, I'm outlining how the Conservative Party of Canada, the conservative premiers such as Doug Ford and Jason Kenney, are fake nationalists and fake populists. How this is the cloak they like to cover themselves in, but they never actually deliver. And the first part is just covering Andrew Scheer and the Conservative Party, the Federal Conservative Party of Canada, but is also going to cover these other parties and how disappointed I've been with them. Because I was a big advocator for Doug Ford when he began his run. From the very second he announced that he was running to become the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario, I was on board. I shielded for this guy. And I have been more than disappointed with what he's done since. But the problem is that so many of these people aren't even up to date with what they considered hate speech. They don't even know what the fuck it is. And a good example of this was a CBC, it was a video that was done back in April 14th, 2019, from The Weekly with Wendy Mesley called "How Hate is Earning Money Online." Now, it didn't get as much attention as I would have hoped, and I wanted to quickly sort of look into the video a little bit. We're not going to watch the whole thing. The whole thing is like 13 minutes long. But just listen to some of the things that Wendy Mesley ends up saying, because she could not be more out of date with what's going on. Alright, so let's get into it.
Completely overrun by social justice warriors.
I need your help.
A huge thank you to those who have supported and made this project possible. So Lauren Southern, Faith Goldie, Milo Yiannopoulos, Alex Jones, they're all big stars on social media. But here's the question. Are people using hate to make money online? And is cutting off access the solution? This past week, the controversial Canadian...
So, literally off the start, advocating for censorship, advocating to have people's livelihoods taken away, the way that they make money, because you don't like what they say. Not to mention that by this time, most of the people that they showed were irrelevant. Milo Yiannopoulos had already been disgraced for what he had said about pedophilia, and the guy's not fucking relevant today. He does everything he can to try and make himself relevant, but he's not. Alex Jones was taken off every single platform. You name it. iTunes, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. He was taken down. Lauren Southern retired from the culture war, retired from doing all this, and Faith Goldie, she's still around actually. She has a large following on YouTube, probably the only one that has some relevance, but not quite the same relevance she did when she was, on Rebel Media. Yeah, the most Zionist news organization in Canada. Well, let's go back just a couple seconds, and let's continue.
And is cutting off access the solution? This past week, the controversial Canadian commentator Faith Goldie was kicked off Facebook, deplatformed for spreading what Facebook deemed dangerous far-right content. The PR was great for Facebook, but what didn't get covered? Well, until recently, Facebook was actually offering up white genocide conspiracy theorists as a special category for advertisers to target. The company has since apologized. And now the federal government says it might step in to regulate not just Facebook, but all social media platforms.
It's funny, because probably not really targeting white supremacists and white nationals, considering that that Facebook is owned and operated by Mark Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg. Now, what type of name is that? You think a Jewish man is actually trying to make sure that white nationalists and white supremacists were being targeted advertisement? It probably was a few that they just made a huge fuss about.
Let's take a look at the challenge here. First, why does it matter? Well, the New Zealand mosque shooter's manifesto was littered with references to internet culture. He also live streamed the shooting on Facebook. He even name-dropped a YouTube star before he killed 50 people. In Quebec City, the mosque shooter obsessively checked the Twitter accounts of anti-Muslim commentators in the months leading up to the attack. But can views like these actually be shut down? This week,
well, when it comes to the New Zealand mosque, how about we talk about the funny things that were happening with that video? First of all, there's plenty of people that live stream on Facebook their suicides or murders or the assaults that are taking place. A lot more than just one man who did a live stream in which he went and shot a place up. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about the magazine that was conveniently already available in the mosque. The one he ran by in his video that you can see lying on the ground when he first entered the mosque. And then he later picks up and loads his weapon with. Let's talk about when he was driving around, shooting out of his windshield, and no glass broke. But at the same time, we saw him drive up to the mosque, and there was no wind coming through the windshield, which would have been able to hear. You would be able to hear on his microphone, but there was none of that. Let's talk about the supposedly dead people that moved around. How about we talk about all that if you're going to talk about the New Zealand mosque shooter?
The U.S. Congress tried to have a serious debate about how to limit the rise of white nationalism online. And it got hijacked by white nationalists online.
Let's also bring up the fact that the alt-right, the white nationalists, not really around anymore, are they? Made a huge presence in 2015, 2016, pretty dead by 2017, 2018. You ever notice that?
The Second World War is not an argument against white identity in 2019.
No. Come on, get with the times.
A YouTube account called Red Ice TV streamed the hearing in real time. Viewers
Later taken off YouTube.
used a feature called Super Chat that can make big money. And some people watching this stream paid hundreds of dollars to pin hateful comments and white nationalist memes, so many that YouTube eventually shut it down. And one of the right-wing Super Chat pioneers is Toronto's Andy Worski. He makes thousands of dollars through a series that he calls Blood Sports, kind of like WWE meets a call-in show. And
You mean Blood Sports? That was dead literally a year before. That was dead by about April of 2018, a year before Wendy Mesley ever made this fucking thing. You see how out of touch these people are? This is why I wanted to show you this video. It's because the first time I watched it, around the time it came out, about April, probably mid-April, late April, when I first saw this, I was screaming at my computer screen over this. I was screaming at him because of how out of touch and out of date with everything that was going on. And then, of course, later on, we're done with this video now, later on, they go on to talk about the experts when it comes to hate speech online. BuzzFeed. I'm not kidding you. They bring in a fucking BuzzFeed reporter. Hold on. That is her.
Litvinenko, she tracks disinformation online with a particular focus on social media. How much are we talking about here? I know you don't know exactly how much money people make, but how much money are with a particular reporter, Jane Litvinenko? She wrote this is BuzzFeed reporter Jane Litvinenko.
There you go. BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed. That's who they go to as a reputable source when it comes to hate speech. Now, there's actually a different reason for this. It's not just having to do with tracking hate speech. It has to do with shut down debate before things get worse. They know the direction that the mass immigration is going to take. They know that people are starting to talk about, they're starting to speak out about things such as Zionist control over the media, over the amount of Jewish people that have positions of power and then are advocating for the destruction of Western society. This is becoming more popular. See, this is why I've talked about a lot on this show when it comes to Jewish influence. It's not because I hate Jewish people, but it's because they have a disproportionate amount of power, a disproportionate amount of representation, and then these are the people who push these philosophies that are destroying our civilization. I mean, you can literally go listen to, it's either the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds. I'll play the video one time. I got it saved on my Minds account somewhere. Where they literally said that they pushed feminism on Western women in order to destroy the nuclear family. Because you destroy the family, it destroys the unity. You destroy the unity, you destroy the unity of the country. And that was the whole point. Divide and conquer. The other reason for mass migration that we're seeing. This will shut down the independent voices that are trying to speak up on this situation. This will shut down the dissenting comments, the people who are trying to point out, you know what, diversity isn't our strength. And that even comes from the New York Times back in an article from 2007. They even talked about how diversity is not a strength. How homogenous societies, homogenous neighborhoods have better relationships with their neighbors, tend to contribute more to society, like community service and volunteer work, how they tend to donate more, how they have safer neighborhoods. This was all put in a 2007, I believe, New York Times article, which one day I'll look around and I'll dig it up and we'll read it here on the air. But now they're trying to shut down those voices. They're trying to shut down alternative media that likes to call out the bullshit online. Because it's not much of a coincidence, too, that the same heritage minister who's tasked with regulating hate speech online, with also making sure that the liberal government will boost local journalism. So it's not enough we give $1.5 billion to the CBC. It's not enough that they're giving out money to all these news sources. And believe me, they're very selective as to who they're giving it out to. The people who will toe the message. The Post medias. The Toronto Stars. The CBCs. Those that are owned by Bell and Rogers. These are the companies that are going to get this funding. You're not going to see Press for Truth get this. You're not even going to see someone like Canada Land get this funding. You're not going to see me get this funding. Where were we? But this has been pushed for a while, because we have here the Canadian Human Rights Commission. Online hate. Time for action now. Now, I'm not exactly sure when this was released, because I can't find a date on it. Let's see. Let's start from here. I speak for the entire... It seems to be a speech that was given, and then this is the transcript of it. It says, I speak for the entire Canadian Human Rights Commission when I say how happy we are to be included in tonight's gathering. Experts, blah, blah, blah. To be able to bring our human rights perspective to the issue of hate. Because for us, hate, and particularly the phenomena of online hate, is not only an urgent public safety issue in Canada, but a fundamental human rights issue. Yes, saying mean words is a human rights issue. Thinking about hate in the context of human rights goes back 70 years. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was responsible for unspeakable atrocities, the Holocaust, atrocities born of hatred. The Declaration united the world in a common understanding that human rights are universal and that hate must not be allowed to go unchecked. 70 years later, the Declaration has helped shape our Canadian values and our understanding of fundamental freedoms and human rights. To sum it up, they're calling, the Human Rights Commission are calling for more sensitive censorship online. Not just online, but in public as well. But this is the main thing that is being targeted. The internet. So we have the Human Rights Tribunal that are doing this, and it's not going to be the Canadian government that ends up being the ones who issue this. It'll be social media companies, and then all of these companies that have started up since then that quote-unquote track hate. Like Morgan Ogre's Foundation. Anti-discrimination organization wants to map offenders with hate atlas. When was this released again? March 22nd, 2019. An advocacy organization says it wants to map hatred and discrimination across Canada in a move that is prompting warnings of caution from one civil liberties group. The Vancouver-based Morgan Ogre Foundation has issued a call for volunteers to help build the Canadian Atlas of Populist Extremists, to be known as CAPE. Founder Morgan Ogre said that mapping tools would tie together extremist groups and people regularly associated with them, and also map incidents involving hate across Canada. Morgan Ogre, I can't remember who it was. I think it actually may have been a politician, like a provincial politician in BC. Morgan Ogre, not too long ago, had a lawsuit against someone for misgendering them. Misgendering it. Him. Her. Oh, I better be careful. She'll probably sue me next. Morgan Ogre, that is backed by numerous different politicians. Definitely on the left, Liberals, NDP, Greens, but even on the so-called right-wing Conservative Party. Here's Michelle Rempel at a Morgan Ogre Foundation event. And here she is speaking at said event. Let's see. Let's see this. We have NDP House Leader Guy Caron, the Honorable Michelle Rempel, activist Morgan Ogre, and LGBTQ special advisor to the the Prime Minister, maybe? But anyway, And then we have here Karen Vecchio. Yes, we have sat down a number of times with Morgan. In order to represent all Canadians, you have to need to be open and frank discussion. I 100% believe in equality for all. Morgan Ogre, NDP, has shared her story with me, and in turn, that helps me help others. Her voice matters to me. So here you have the red Tories of red Tories, the Liberals of the Conservatives, Michelle Rempel, the one who voted in favor of Bill C-16, you know, that law that got Jordan Peterson famous, the one where you could get in trouble for misgendering now transgender people. And here you have Jody Wilson-Raybould, who is there. They're all on the same page, and they're all advocating for the same thing. So they'll empower someone like Morgan Ogre to map what you do online. But they're not. But Morgan Ogre is not alone. Canadian company compiling database of hate speech that may help others spot and stop it. Toronto firm HateBase analyzed data to help spot hateful messages that could lead to violence. Curb hate speech, and ultimately, the violence it can spur, Timothy Quinn and his team have spent years compiling the most vile words found on the internet. His Toronto firm, HateBase, relies on software that digs through the web several times an hour and spots potential hateful words, which are flagged to NGOs and social media companies interested in monitoring and curbing hate on their platforms. HateBase multilingual hate speech lexicon has more than 3,600 terms so far and continues to grow. The company defines hate speech as any term which broadly categorizes a specific group of people based on malignant, qualitative, and or subjective attributes, particularly if those attributes pertain to ethnicity, nationality, religion, sexuality, disability, and class. Now, what is so dangerous about this is the precedent that is also being set these days by activists, anti-racist activists, as they like to call themselves. And that has to be with the idea you can't be sexist to men and you can't be racist to white people. So you think that this is going to be that you get called a hateful word, or all of those people of color online that say kill all white people, or some of the most vitriolic, derogatory terms that they like to use for white people, that they're going to get targeted? No. This is disproportionately going to affect one side. Just like what I was talking about at the beginning, when it comes to the immigration and the race mixing, this is the same thing. It's disproportionately going to affect white heterosexual men. And the thing is too, before we get into this hate base and we'll take a quick look through, the other thing about it too is there's actually a group of people online that you can thank for implementing what is happening right now on social media. The censorship that's happened on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook, that's been happening a lot more. You can thank what is known as the skeptic community. Some of you may be familiar with this. Probably the most well-known skeptic is Sargon of Akkad, the YouTuber, Carl Benjamin, who recently went out to become a member of European Parliament for the United Kingdom Independence Party, UKIP, in which they got decimated in this past election. But him and his community, they're the ones you can thank. And the reason you can thank them is because they were advocating for an app that was known as Candid. Now, Candid was an app that was it was an offshoot of this other app called Whisper. And they found that on Whisper, you were having a lot of quote-unquote bullies on there. So Candid ended up recreating this app, Whisper, and it was going to have an AI algorithm in which it was going to stop these bullies by pretty much censoring them and kicking them off the platform. And all of these skeptics were hired on to advocate for this app, to promote this app, to get people to use this app. And what it ended up doing is when something was put out there, let's say a word or a term or a phrase, this AI algorithm was learning from the people that were using it. It was learning on what should be considered hate speech. And they did that because they would have all these people from different political affiliations, different religions, ideologies, and they would report report these words or these phrases as hate speech. And the AI would log that, and if it was coming from a few different communities, few different political affiliations and cultures, then it would log that as, okay, this is an offensive term. Now the app went tits up. But the technology that was used, this AI algorithm, the people that were working on Candid went on to work for all of these social media companies. And right as that was happening, right as Candid went tits up and all these people and the technology and the data went off to work for all these different social media companies like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google, that's when this wave of censorship ended up happening. That was when all of this adpocalypse on YouTube ended up happening. So these people that apparently advocated for things such as free speech were instrumental in destroying free speech online. And you can bet that a lot of these databases, this hate base, and this Morgan Ogre hate atlas, are using very similar algorithms in order to track and document you. This is hate base, right here. And you got all the different terms you can use, these are all the different terms that are offensive, what language they come from, how offensive are they? And it goes on and on and on, with thousands of different words. Now, it is not the responsibility of the government, of social media, in order to make sure that you're not offended online. It is not their responsibility. But that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter because they're going to do it anyway. And especially in terms of the government, they're going to do it because it gives them more control. It gives them more control. It gives the true owners of our country, the political elites of the world, the social elites, it gives them the control. And you can call these political elites, these whatever you want. You can call them the Illuminati, you can call them the New World Order, you can call them whatever you want, but this is the group that we're talking about. This group that is made up of influencers and bankers and world leaders. This is what they do. And this is the whole point. And it is pushing towards a new world order, a one world government. You can guarantee that. What do you think is happening right now in the EU when they are advocating? You have members of European Parliament, MEPs, that are advocating that these sovereign countries need to secede that sovereignty over towards the EU. When they're talking about an EU army that will, in times of crisis, like maybe what's going on with the Yellow Vests in France, will come in. People from another country with no affiliation with these people will come in and handle it. Do you think a EU army with soldiers from Greece care about cracking some skulls of some French people? No, you can guarantee that. And that's what they're going to try and do with the United Nations. They're already trying to implement, it is going to get implemented, a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, which at first is going to be people that are appointed to the position, and then they say you want people to vote for it. But as soon as you set that up, that literally is a new world order, a one world government. They've been trying to take more and more control, and that's the point of UN Agenda 2030. That is the whole point. The carbon tax, your money isn't going to the government. That money is going to the United Nations. Because in 2012, there was a, I might actually still have it saved. Hold on. In 2012, there was a, where am I? There was a report that was released, or whatever you want to call it. I guess you would call it it was a report from the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs. In that time, they were literally calling for a carbon tax to raise money for themselves because they were starting to lose money. And here it is. So it is, UN calls for international tax to raise $400 billion to finance developmental needs. And here we go. Down here, a tax on carbon dioxide emissions in developed countries, a tax of $25 per ton would raise an estimated $250 billion per year collected by national authorities but earmarked for international cooperation. So that is a tax, a carbon tax, that is then collected by your government and sent off to the United Nations. It's also asking for you to cede more control to the International Monetary Fund, the Rockefeller Rothschild-controlled International Monetary Fund. And then when it comes to climate change, we're already starting to see people that are advocating they're advocating that climate change is such an extreme disaster that maybe people shouldn't have private property. And for those who paid any attention to it, there was an article that was written by, was it Forbes? I think it was Forbes. And you can look it up. The article's title is called, It's 2030. I own nothing and I couldn't be happier. And it wasn't a real article. It was like a short story almost. But in that time, it was talking about how people didn't own houses or apartment buildings. It was that you rented them out. So when I'm not using my apartment building, it's used for business meetings. I don't own any appliances. I just order my appliances whenever I want to make food and a delivery boy shows up and drops them off. I don't own a car. We don't use gasoline anymore. We can't believe that people used to use such pollution. You know, there's trees everywhere. It was this freaking supposedly utopia. But everything leads back to the year 2030. UN Agenda 21 became UN Agenda 2030. Oh, apparently it was 2018 when they said, we got 12 years to solve this this climate change crisis or we're all dead. 2030. Year 2030. Oh, I don't own anything and I'm living a great life. They want you to live in the pods. They want you to eat the bugs. They want you to work in cages. Amazon, I'm looking at you. So you'll go to work. You'll make a slave's wage, own practically nothing, live in these pods where there are, a dozen people that sleep around you. You have absolutely no privacy. And if you're not living in the pods, they want you to live in that little cylinder, that little concrete cylinder. I'm sure probably most of you have seen it. Maybe I can pull it up. Where is it? Yeah, there it is. If you're not living in the pods, they want you living in this. They don't want you to have homes anymore. They want to stuff you in. They want you living in either an apartment where you're packed tight with everyone else, barely have enough room for an actual family, or they want you living in the pods, or they want you living in this. And almost every single one of these are not ideal to have kids and raise them. You almost need to have a home in order to have kids. While not strictly necessary, it's very difficult. Because usually the biggest apartment you can find at a reasonable price, and even that's not reasonable anymore, is a 2-bedroom in a low-income area. usually means more crime too. But this is the future that they want for you. And just like what was laid out in the Kalergi plan, which, you know what, I'm going to talk about more next time, I think. But just like in the Kalergi plan, it's all coming to fruition. The Kalergi plan, which was written in the book Practical Idealism by Richard Kalergi, in which the entire world comes together in an urban environment where all the races are mixed together. Because apparently, when you just mix all the races together, you get all the best qualities of the race and none of the bad qualities. Because every single race, every single gender has its good qualities and its bad qualities. But apparently, you're just going to get the best qualities and none of the crappy qualities from that. Except for the Jewish people. Oh no. They're geniuses. No, they're the ones who are going to lead the world to salvation. He explicitly says in that book that all races should mix, but not the Jews. They're the only ones. Holds them in quite high esteem. And this is also why I talk a lot about Zionist and Jewish influence. It's because a lot of this is being manipulated by Jewish people. A lot of it. And I don't like the influence. I don't like what they're trying to do. For instance, for those who saw Lauren Southern's documentary, Borderless, in that documentary, there is one person that she highlights. And it's this woman who is taking on people that are trying to get into Europe and coaches them about how you can, tell them you're a Christian, tell them you're a refugee, tell them you're gay and you're being persecuted in your own country. All these tips to get around immigration if they're going through the legal channels and not sneaking in. And that woman was an Israeli Jew who had advocated vehemently that Israel was a land for the Jewish people. Oh no, they shouldn't be able to immigrate. And in fact, for the white Jews. Because have you heard about what they do to the Ethiopian Jews over there? Not only are they treated terribly, not only are they treated as second-class citizens, have a bunch of hate crimes committed about them, but you never hear about that. Not only that, but they actually sterilize the Ethiopian Jews. Hold on. Ethiopian Jews sterilized. And they did it. This is from 2013. They did it through vaccines. This week, a report revealed that African women immigrating to Israel were subject to mandatory contraceptive injection, effectively amounting to forced, if temporary, sterilization, made global headlines. Some 130,000 Ethiopians, most of them Jewish, live in Israel. The community experienced higher poverty and unemployment rate than the rest of the country's Jewish population. In the past decade, the birth rates among Ethiopian Israelis had declined by at least 20%. Advocacy groups now claim that this decline is a result of birth control regimen forced upon Ethiopian immigrant women. According to an article by Haaretz, an Israeli news source, one Ethiopian immigrant said that the doctors who injected her claimed that the people who frequently give birth suffer. While it is possible, if highly unlikely, that doctors genuinely had the women's health in mind when they forcibly injected them with contraceptives, there is no excuse for depriving women sovereignty over their own reproductive choices. Notice how the Western population, when it comes to fertility, is dropping rapidly. Probably a few factors, but do you ever think that we're being sterilized intentionally? It's because we are. So that is the reality we live in. That is the truth. And I'll leave you with that little bit to think over. That little bit to consider. I think most of what I've said here today, I've backed up with some evidence. So, take it what you will. I'm not here to lie to you, although again, skepticism is good because I am just an anon online. But take what I said and research it for yourself. And tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. Thank you all for joining me on the True North Report today. It's the news everyone needs to know. It really is. That's why I do this. And once again, if you like the work that I do, please check out the TrueNorthReport.org. This is a site where I link to other articles, I post my own articles, my videos, important documents, channels that I find are good, and videos that I find are important. News sources that provide good amount of content. So please check it out, share it, share the link, share the articles, share the videos. Click the thumbs up on this video. And if you like the work I do, and you want to help sponsor me, there's a link to my Patreon below. There's a link to my Patreon below, and if you want to contribute anything, I always appreciate it. It will help me going and help the True North Report going. But the biggest thing you can do is share these videos. Share the True North Report. And with that, have a great day, everyone. This is the True North Report, news everyone needs to know.